All right, Debbie, did you want to kick us off or you want me to kick us off?
Yeah, you can kick us off. That's perfect, Lisa.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to this webinar. It looks like we have two presenters who have, two panelists who have just joined us, so that's good. I want to say happy holidays to everyone who's listening live. I know a lot of you are going to be listening to the recording for this, and so maybe it's not appropriate timing for you, but for the rest of us, I do want to wish everyone a happy holidays. So today we are looking at the working groups, half of the working groups in the SETAC ACLCA North American LCIA Interest Group, who have been working on technical issues in LCA. And just want to kick us off a little bit. The interest group is open to anyone. We do encourage membership in either the ACLCA or SETAC, but anyone is welcome to join the interest group. Christoph Koffler is my co-chair in this group, and he's the one who actually does all the work, the majority of the real work. So I appreciate all the work that he's done. He's not able to join us today. And we have a steering committee who help us with what we're doing. Disclaimer that the two organizations have asked me to ask all of you to understand is that the views expressed in these presentations represent the opinions of the authors and shall not be misconstrued to represent or imply any endorsement by any of the affiliated organizations, including the Society for Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, SETAC, and the American Center for Life Cycle Assessment, ACLCA. So how we got here, the SETAC North America Interest Group was established about 25 years ago. ACLCA is almost as old. And in 2019, the technical committee of ACLCA was about to start up again. And Chris and I kind of suggested that we join forces between the ACLCA and SETAC to form this joint interest group. So this interest group functions as the ACLCA technical committee, and it actually has worked out really well because with the two organizations together, there has been a lot of interest, and there's now a lot of activity going on, as you'll see in a moment. In 2020, we sent out a call for working groups, volunteers for working groups on some of the topics that the steering committee came up with. There were a few additional ideas that came forward that have formed working groups. And in late 2020, early this year, those 8 working groups started up. We are having biannual updates. Sorry, that's semi-annual updates. So twice a year, we have these updates on video, and all of the working groups are still open for volunteers. And here are the different groups. Last time we heard from Circularity and LCA. So if you're interested in any of the topics from last time, it was recorded and you can find it on the ACLCA website. We did the indirect emissions and LCA. The SDGs in LCA, I believe, is going to be recorded. We'll have marine litter in LCA today, along with the environmentally extended IO, LCA of emerging tech, and the regionalized LCIA. And then new technologies in LCA was also done last time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and ask Stephen Perez to talk about marine litter.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is going to be a little bit brief because the Marine Litter and LCA group has had some leadership transitions recently. You saw the slide Lisa just showed before, which had our chair and co-chair listed, both of which of those have recently assumed new roles. So they're no longer able to be chair and co-chair. So at this point, I am acting as kind of the de facto chair, but what we're trying to do is recruit new members. If you're interested in joining the group, I think it's a really interesting topic that's very important for the LCA community. So reach out to me. I'll have Lisa and Christoph put my contact information. I can drop in the chat actually too, but please join us in helping address this problem in LCA. We need a chair and new members. So definitely reach out to me. So we also have been kind of over the transition phase of the leadership, trying to figure out if there's a way to kind of align with existing efforts out there. There's a group called ACLCA that perhaps some of you have heard about. So we're in communication with them, trying to determine if it makes sense to join forces with them and just kind of help them do what they're doing and still address the objectives of our working group. So ACLCA is a group focused on marine impacts in LCA as well. And actually that group started in 2019. It's a multi-stakeholder initiative. And the goal of that group is to integrate potential environmental impacts of marine litter into LCA. So of course there's overlap there with what our working group is doing. And the idea is that that will lead to more comprehensive picture of the potential environmental impacts in order to identify trade-offs associated with the use of plastic and other materials in that production system. So again, there's not been a formal decision made with joining forces with them, but we're in communication with the chair of that group, and we are trying to figure out if there's a path forward there. So that's pretty much going to be my update, pretty brief. I will open the floor to questions now if anybody has them. So I appreciate everyone's time here. Back to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Stephen.
Or to the audience for questions, I suppose. And actually, should I drop my contact information in there now?
I think I got it.
Okay, you got it. Perfect. There it is. Awesome. Yep. So feel free to reach out. And if you're gung-ho about the topic and want to be the chair, that's open as well. So let us know.
Yeah, and if anybody has questions, you can drop them in the chat, or I think you can raise your hand. Let me just see if I can see you.
Okay, and yeah, I guess this is being recorded, so could questions come in? If they do come in, just pass them along to me. That's fine.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Stephen. And yeah, everyone, if you're interested in this working group in marine litter, this is an awesome chance to make a difference here. So definitely reach out to Stephen and step up and do a little bit more. We'd appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Stephen. Let's move on then to the environmentally extended IO with Julie Chen.
Hello, thank you very much. Let me share my screen. We have a few slides to present. Okay. All right, let me figure out this Zoom configuration. All right, can you see the slides? Is it presenting?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, our group focuses on environmentally extended input-output model, and then our group members, the co-chair Chris Shuang is here, and our group member Mick is here. So they can also answer the questions, and then feel free to interrupt me if I miss something or you want to add something during this short presentation. In our group, we after last updates, we met and we decided. Sorry, why is not moving? Sorry. Okay, so we decided we would divide our group into some subgroups, which can focus on different individual concepts of like environmentally extended output applications. So the application means we want to understand who used EEIO model in different sectors, different groups. So as you can see from the slides, we're interested in the national, state, regional, or local, like stakeholders and government organization stakeholders, industry sector or private firm, and then some other stakeholders. So how they use or develop or focus on EEIO research or use case or applications. So as you can see, we have different chairs for each subgroup, and then we have different group members. So in this phase, we met together, the whole group, and also we met individually for the subgroups. And this round, we did some literature review to understand what's going on in each of these application. So as you can see, this is the result of the overall search in the literature. So we did some bibliometrics analysis. Bibliometric analysis, if you don't use this a lot, it's a general search of different kind of keywords to understand what's who published these and who uses data, how many publications are there, how many citations are there, and there are other things we can see from a bibliometrics analysis in the next slide I'm going to show. But in this one, it's a general view of how many publications are there and how many citations are there, which focus on environmental extended input-output model or input-output model in general. And then you can see the data is from 1971 to 2022, which is next year. Some publications already published next year. And the bar charts, the bars shows the number of publications, and then in the left side of this y-axis. And then the blue line shows the number of citations, which use the scale on the right, the y-axis on the right. So you can see there's, the topic of EEIO, it's tracking a lot of attentions, especially after 2008, after year of 2000, 2008. And there are a lot of more publications and then a lot more citations. Which means EEIO is a very attractive topic in general. And then we also focus on different individual subgroups. As you can see, national, government, industry level. We use search terms to narrow down what publications focus on national or government or industry applications or stakeholders. And you can see their number of publications, citation numbers, and H-index. And then we also focus on what research field they are focused on in these subgroups. So all of these three subgroups, they the most popular, or we can say popular research fields are environmental science, environmental engineering, and then some sustainability related fields. And then the countries which publish these EEIO related articles are usually China, US, and Australia. And then it depends on different subgroup, there are other different countries. But China is definitely dominating the publications and followed by US. And we also, for the subgroup meetings, we also talk about some other publications or reports that are not really published as a journal article, because this bibliometrics analysis is focused on publications in journal articles or conference proceedings. So we already had some meetings. We figured out some of these applications, but for the next steps, we're going to refine some of this review to see what more we can know. So for example, for government, in these subgroup meetings, we already figured out there are many different kinds of applications used by government agency, using EEIO as decision-making, or develop their models, or improve their models. And there are some examples here. And then, so for some private sectors or industries, there are some applications, case studies, as you can see on this slide, on the McDonald's and some other private sectors. So usually they don't publish their results in a journal or conference proceeding, but sometimes they show on the website, sometimes they have some models, sometimes they have reports. So we're going to focus on these for the next steps. And then also we're going to refine the review to see what are the most important publications and what can we get from them. But the overall goal is to understand who use EEIO model and who use them to do what. All right, so this is the short presentation of what we have done. Please let us know if you have questions. And then Christoph, please, add something if you have, and then please make comments too. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Julie. I have a comment actually. We've been doing a lot of organizational LCA recently, and we're using service data from the EEIO databases. So we find that really useful, and there really is no other way to model the services. So it's a great way for us. So
exactly.
Happy to help the community on, if you have any specific questions on how we're using it, happy to help with that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually,
any other questions?
I had a question, Julie. So NIST, you said they're using EEIO. Do you know which tool they're using?
Let me see. Like, just a second. I think it's from the report of our government subgroup meeting. So I cannot give you an answer now because there's input from some subgroup members, but this person definitely knows.
Right. Good, thank you.
Was there someone else who wanted to ask a question? Feel free to just speak up. Okay. Barring none, thank you, Julie. This is really interesting, and looking forward to seeing your next steps. Great. All right, next up, we're going to be looking at the LCIA of Emerging Tech with Jewel Burcherson. So Jewel, if you would take it away. Or it looks like Mick is doing this.
Hey, yeah,
We're doing it together.
I'm going to turn it over to Jewel at a certain point, but I think I'm taking the lead.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it's something I wanted to say. We have had some progress this I guess half year, 2 quarters. Not as much as we would have hoped. We struggled to find a common meeting time for the group. So yeah, we would get kind of maybe a quarter of the group joining regularly. But yeah, I'll discuss that more as we go on. So yeah, the working group leadership is still the same. So me, Mick Carvalho-Dale from Clemson University, and Jewel Burcherson from University of Calgary. We've added quite a few more people. So we're up to 35 members now in total, and you can see the breakdown there, mainly from academia, as you might expect. And then maybe a quarter from private industry and a quarter from public. So we have a few DOE folks. Our mission statement has not changed. So basically reflecting the fact that LCA is increasingly, we're being asked to conduct LCA at kind of lower and lower technology readiness levels for technologies. So that's what we're meaning by emerging technology in this context, is pre-commercialized technologies. So technology developers may be developing a new type of PV panel, so perovskite solar cells or something like that, and they're wanting to try and understand the environmental impacts of those technologies before they're commercialized. The existing tools frameworks, ISO 14040, 14044, are not, once you kind of read through them, dig into them, I mean, they're broad enough to kind of cover this domain, but what we feel is that actually, I think probably when people were writing them, they were more expecting that you were looking at, let's say, a factory where you can go and take data on the processes involved, and then that would be how that product was produced, let's say. Whereas that's not really the case for a new technology. The kind of lab scale data that you're collecting is not really reflective of how that technology might perform once it is commercialized, let's say. And then particularly if you're comparing a new, let's say, biofuel to an incumbent petroleum technology, that's not really a fair comparison if the biofuel is at the bench stage, right? So these are the kind of things that we're trying to understand. And I think where we're landing more and more is kind of working through ISO and trying to provide kind of additional guidance, maybe highlighting pitfalls that you may want to try and avoid, and trying to identify methodologies that might work in these different areas. So there have been previous review articles done in this space. And so we're kind of obviously looking at those, looking at kind of the state of the art literature. We're also increasingly trying to build bridges between LCA and other research that is done in this space. So technology assessment, techno-economic assessment, those aren't necessarily done within LCA, but increasingly they're being kind of utilized at the same time as LCA. And that's a useful tool for kind of modeling what a technology might look like once it's commercialized. Identifying some of these barriers to the adoption of LCA by decision makers. And then, as I said, developing this roadmap to enable better decision making. Better, I guess, LCA analysis. So right now, what we're thinking is we have some white papers identified, and we're breaking this down through the different stages of LCA, so goal and scope, inventory, impact assessment, and interpretation. We're thinking after that, there might be some sort of roadmap document, so a guide to the ISO standards, potentially teaching materials, and then also maybe a proposal to develop a research collaboration network on this topic. So at this point, so we did have a special session at the ACLCA conference, and at this point I'm going to turn it over to Jewel, who is actually kind of leading that effort, one of the leaders of that effort.
Great, thanks, Mick. Yeah, so it was in September with the virtual ACLCA conference, and we had this special session where we had sort of an overview of where we've gotten to as part of the working group. And then we actually went into active breakout sessions where we were looking for feedback and discussion about some of these, initial thoughts in terms of how we're going to structure this, and getting new ideas. And we've done this a few times through the ACLCA conference, and always come with experience from the audience and questions that they have that really help to enhance this. And so we had multiple breakout sessions, and then tried to synthesize some of this into the work that we've been doing. We could just go to the next. So we had specific questions that we started out with, but allowed the conversation to sort of move around as appropriate based on the groups that were there. Again, we broke this down into life cycle stages because we felt like in terms of giving guidance to practitioners that are actually looking at emerging technologies, helping them step through at each stage, what are the questions you should be asking, what are some of the issues, and what are some of the ways in which you could handle that for emerging technologies. And so I won't go through all of the questions, but these are just the set that we had, as part of the kickoff to the session. If we go to the next slide, I can show you, we actually had breakout groups and then jam boards to actually brainstorm ideas. And so again, people could select which of the groups they went to. This is an example of one of the sets of questions we asked for the goal and scope breakout group. And people were able to just put up their thoughts, their experience, their questions, and some of the issues that they've seen. And so, one example is, are there multiple ways that a technology might be consumed? And so for emerging technology prior to being deployed, how do you think about that? And how might that change the functional unit? And do you have to think about multiple functional units in order to look at the different ways in which it could be applied? Right. And then just trying to think as part of that conversation, how do we start thinking about guidance that we could provide for this? The next one was the inventory breakout group. And so this question was, how can we best model materials and processes that don't even exist yet today? So where do we get the data from? And is there empirical data that we should be using? Also thinking about other groups that we could reach out to help with this kind of work, as Mick had mentioned. So going back to the basics, actually doing some of the fundamental principles and modeling from that perspective was suggested as one of the aspects. Primary data collection with suppliers is really important. So working with the technology developers, once we get publications in the public domain, usually the technology has evolved quite a bit from that point. And so getting the latest information and actually working with the experts developing the technology is really important. And then data sensitivity analysis, obviously the levels of uncertainty and methods for uncertainty analysis is something that we've talked quite a bit about in the inventory group. With that, I'll turn it back to Mick. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jewel. Yeah, so as I said, we've kind of broken down into these separate teams, somewhat similar to the EIO group. So we have goal and scope, inventory, impact assessment, and interpretation, and leads and co-leads in each of those groups. The teams meet either weekly or bi-weekly, and they've kind of identified deliverables, and they're kind of working on those and working forwards. And then we're still having the kind of larger group meeting every other week to try and kind of give updates from each of these teams. That is the same schedule that I present, or that was presented at the last update. That's potentially looking a little bit ambitious now, but we'll see how we get on. And then current challenges, especially this last semester, was maintaining the momentum of the group. So struggling to find that time that worked for everyone to meet. That's a little easier now that we've split out into smaller groups. So hopefully we'll be able to keep going and really achieve some decent deliverables. We're struggling with kind of sufficient diversity of experience and participation. We're especially lacking folks in impact assessment. So this is a plea to SETAC members. Anyone that develops environmental impact models, has a particular interest in life cycle impact assessment, please join us. And that team, I would say none of the members of our team that work in that's a particular focus of their research. And so, yeah, that team is kind of struggling to say anything more than kind of general comments right now. And then obviously, because we're all busy, then a particular challenge is finding time to work on tasks. But yeah, it's just life, I guess. With that, I think that's everything that I had to say. And so I'm happy to turn it back to Lisa or have questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Jewel. Does anyone have questions for Mick or Jewel? And again, we're small enough, so just speak up. I have a question. I have a couple of questions, actually. My first question is, I know a lot of people have been working on what they call prospective LCA, and others, including ourselves, are doing anticipatory LCA or using an anticipatory approach. Could the two of you kind of talk about those two approaches, any other approaches there are, and what's missing from those, and what your goal is beyond what those are already doing?
I don't know that we're particularly looking beyond what those groups are good at, what that research is doing. I mean, we are obviously building on the research output from those groups, publications, that kind of thing. I think the specific value add that we're looking at is really going back to the ISO and trying to kind of very clearly identify that where are the kind of stumbling points, kind of point by point, almost kind of a checklist to run alongside the ISO guidelines. I don't know, Jewel, did you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say we had a paper published last year that sort of started scratching the surface of looking at that. And as part of that effort, we tried to look through the terminology that was being used, and we couldn't find sort of comprehensive, consistent sort of usage of that language. We also determined as a group that maybe it wouldn't be worth our time at that point to really try to propose the terminology and how to define each of those things, rather focus on the aspects, right? So some studies will really focus on how do you elaborate on the background system and how that will evolve over time as this emerging technology moves forward. Others will focus on the technology. There's those kind of aspects that we've focused our discussions on a little bit more than the terminology. I think at some point we're gonna have to come back around to that, because I think we're talking about similar things, but not using the terms consistently throughout. So that is, on our list, but we sort of put that off for now. We're sort of focusing on the mechanics of actually doing the work at this point.
Great, really good. I looked at the little topics that were under or suggestions that were under life cycle inventory, and I didn't see under specification, and that is one that we use that we find really useful. So I just thought I'd throw that out as an idea to add to that.
So by under specification, you mean incomplete data or?
No, there's a paper by Elsa Olivetti on using under specification, really as a way to shortcut doing more streamlined LCAs, but we found it's quite useful for emerging tech, where you're essentially looking at, I'm going to use plastic, I don't know what plastic, so you basically stochastically look at all the different plastics you possibly could and see how much difference does it make, right? If it doesn't make any difference in your system, then it doesn't matter, right? But if it does, then maybe that choice is important for that particular product. So anyway, yeah, if you look up under specification and Elsa Olivetti, you'll find her paper. I can also send it to you, but
yeah, thank you. That's great.
Anybody else? I'm just checking to see that our last panelist has not arrived. So if there are no questions for Julie or Mick, are there any questions for any of the other presenters? All right, hearing none, I think I'm going to let everybody go. I'm sure you have lots to do before the holidays, and I'll again wish everybody very happy holidays, and thank you presenters for the good presentations and for all the hard work you've been putting in. Thank you, audience, both now and in the future listening to this. Thank you for your time and attention. And with that, Debbie, do we want to close the webinar at this point?
Sounds great. Thanks, everyone. We will be posting the recording next week. Take care. Happy holidays.